Welcome to the 700 Club. A freed Israeli hostage described his nearly 500 days in captivity to the United Nations yesterday. He told the UN Security Council, "I've come back from hell."
Eli Sharabi testified of being beaten and starved. He also watched the Hamas captors eat the UN humanitarian meals that were meant for Gaza's citizens. Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem.
My name is Eli Sharabi. I'm 53 years old. I've come back from hell. I've returned to tell my story.
Eli Sharabi, freed after 491 days in captivity, addressed the UN Security Council on Thursday.
I cannot begin to describe the agony. It was hell. I was fed a piece of pita a day, maybe a sip of tea. Hunger consumed everything. They beat me. They broke my ribs. I didn't care. I just wanted a piece of bread.
He also testified Hamas stole the humanitarian aid sent into Gaza.
I saw Hamas terrorists carrying boxes with the UN and UNRWA emblems on them into the tunnel. Dozens and dozens of boxes, paid by your government. They would eat many meals a day from the UN aid in front of us, and we never received any of it. When you speak of humanitarian aid, remember this. Hamas eats like kings, while hostages starve.
Sharabi, who dreamed of rebuilding his life with his wife and 2 daughters, learned that Hamas murdered them on October 7th. Israeli UN Ambassador Danny Danon chastised the UN for ignoring Hamas's crimes against the captives.
For 530 days, you have erased the hostages. You have spoken about Gaza without mentioning the crimes of Hamas. You have debated humanitarian assistance without acknowledging the humanitarian crimes Hamas is deliberately inflicting on the hostages. You have had the audacity to talk about a ceasefire without demanding that those held in Hamas's terror tunnels be freed.
On the ground in Gaza, the IDF expanded its military operation. As the Houthis fired another ballistic missile towards Israel Thursday, the U.S. continues its air campaign to stop the Iranian-backed group from terrorizing Israel and the region. Meanwhile, in an unprecedented move, Israel's cabinet voted unanimously to fire the head of the country's domestic intelligence agency. Ronen Bar is the head of the Shin Bet, the equivalent of America's FBI. Netanyahu accused Bar of failing to warn the government in time about October 7th. As Iranians celebrated the Persian New Year of Nowruz, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke directly to the Iranian people.
May this be a year of servat, prosperity. Prosperity when you, the people of Iran, can finally enjoy Iran's rich natural resources, those resources that have been so long denied to you by an oppressive regime.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Please continue to pray for Israel. This is ongoing horror. And what has happened at the UN is an international disgrace. They continue to accuse Israel of war crimes, of genocide, of these things, when Israel is the victim in this. Hamas started this war, and they started it with a program they called the Al-Aqsa Flood. Their intent was to go all the way to Jerusalem, to the Temple Mount, and their charter says we want to wipe Israel off the map, and we want to kill all the Jews in Israel. That's where the genocide is, and to say it's not this case and to turn it on its head is just absolutely horrific. We need to stand with Israel. We've got an update on the Shin Bet decision where the cabinet of Israel unanimously decided to fire the head of their equivalent of an FBI. And now the Supreme Court of Israel has stepped into this and says you have to delay it until we can have more hearings and determine is there probable cause. It's another instance where instead of let's get efficient with government and hold people accountable, now suddenly you have to do it through some kind of court hearing. It makes no sense. Let your government run the government, and let the people who elect that government, if they don't like it, they get to change governments. But to have the court system that is unelected come into this is a little off kilter. So it's not just happening here in the United States, it's happening in Israel too. We'll give you more on that story because they're asked for an expedited hearing on April 8th. So it's a very tense time in Israel, a tense time on the world stage. Let's pray for the government of Iran to change. Let's pray for all these terror groups, whether it's the Houthis or the Hezbollah or Hamas. They're all extensions of the same ideology. And that ideology is dedicated to wiping Israel off the map. In other news, health officials are monitoring a measles outbreak that has spread to 16 states. And let me underline the importance of this because I had childhood measles several times, and in all of that, it was before vaccines were available. My pediatrician thought it would be better for me to go through it. When you have measles, what it does is it attacks the ability of your body to create T cells. And so until your body can recover that, you're going to be prone to infection. This is a terrible disease because not only does it make you sick with the virus, it then affects your immune system going forward for your life. This is very serious to see this kind of outbreak, and we need to really pay attention to this. John Jessup has more on that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Thank you, Gordon. Serious, considering that the outbreak was considered eradicated back in 2000, but more than 330 cases of the measles have been reported nationwide. The largest outbreaks are in New Mexico and West Texas, where one child died. CBN medical reporter Lori Johnson has more.
Measles, one of the most contagious viruses in the world, can be prevented with a vaccine. In fact, back in 2000, so many Americans were vaccinated that measles was considered eliminated. However, vaccine rates have fallen, leading to sickness, hospitalization, and even death. Workers at Covenant Medical Center in West Texas, one of the hardest hit areas, gather in the hospital chapel to pray. A 6-year-old unvaccinated girl died here, the first U.S. measles death in over a decade. The hospital has treated more than 20 other patients.
You see them struggling to breathe, they don't want to eat or drink.
Doctors recommend children get their first measles vaccine at 1 year old, then a booster at age 4. Adults can get them too.
There's no harm, even if they did receive those 2 childhood doses, in going out and getting a booster now as an adult.
The CDC says measles spreads in areas where kindergarten vaccine rates dip below 95%.
Do I trust all the vaccines? No. I'm not sure if they're always for my best.
This West Texas pastor says despite his vaccine hesitancy, he believes his congregants should decide for themselves.
With this measles situation, I can just honestly tell you that we haven't taken any steps as a church.
Well-known vaccine skeptic Robert Kennedy Jr. is now America's top health official. He said the current outbreaks are not unusual.
There have been 4 measles outbreaks this year. In this country last year, there were 16. So it's not unusual. We have measles outbreaks every year.
Kennedy previously linked the measles vaccine to autism.
It's disheartening to see people in power that are not willing to recognize the importance of vaccines, not willing to recognize the safety of vaccines. And it's discouraging for us who are on the front lines.
Despite several studies debunking any link between the measles vaccine and autism, Kennedy reportedly asked the CDC to look into it further. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Thank you, Lori. President Trump's executive order signed Thursday takes first steps toward abolishing the Department of Education. Republican lawmakers are already at work trying to back it up with legislation. The administration's stated goal is to restore education authority to the states. And this week, the Texas State Senate passed a bill requiring the 10 Commandments be placed in public schools. It still has to pass the House before becoming law. Opponents argue the bill violates the First Amendment. Still, more than a dozen other states are pursuing similar measures. CBN's Paul Petit reports from Texas.
This is Foodless's family. Thank you for the great message last night.
Adam Althouse believes his 16-year-old son Dylan and other Texas high school students would benefit from daily seeing the 10 Commandments in their classrooms.
They can look at it. They could say, maybe go home with their parents and say, what does this mean? What does, shall not covet thy neighbor's wife? What does that mean? So put the thought in their mind.
Texas is joining at least 14 states where legislators want to reintroduce Christian principles in public school spaces.
Posting the 10 Commandments in our public school classrooms allows students to have an understanding and an appreciation for our heritage, for systems of law, and the connection of the 10 Commandments to Western civilization.
Jonathan Sines, an attorney with the group Texas Values, helped draft the Texas bill.
We're confident with the recent election results that this is what voters want. They want to make sure that we preserve our values and that we teach about these things in our public schools, and we get back to basics.
Lawmakers in these states are also seeking to take advantage of the political shift and Supreme Court rulings, opening the door to more religious expression in schools.
God is mentioned in the Declaration of Independence. It's on our money, in music, like God Bless America. It's in our literature, and it's in the pledge to the flag. Why would we not mention God in our schools? The courts need to understand that by removing God, they are replacing it with nothing.
Opponents, including the ACLU and others, however, argue such measures violate the First Amendment.
This is clearly outrageous. This is not religious liberty. This is religious tyranny.
Louisiana became the first state to mandate displaying the 10 Commandments in classrooms. Freedom from Religion Foundation is among those challenging that law.
It's up to parents to indoctrinate or not their children or expose them to whatever so-called holy books they want or whatever edicts or mandates they think are true, but not for our public schools. So, of course, we're very alarmed at all the copycat legislation.
State legislators here in Texas believe their bill will stand up to scrutiny following a 2022 Supreme Court case that ruled a Washington State high school football coach had the right to pray on the field immediately after football games.
Only thing I even asked for from the very beginning was to be reinstated as a coach and to be able to pray on the 50-yard line. But the great part about it is it just took one person to stand up and said, enough is enough.
Coach Joe Kennedy believes the ruling in his favor has energized the fight for religious freedom in schools.
People are standing up. They're being bold in their faith. They're being bold in their constitutional rights as Americans.
It's basically a combination.
While Althouse wants Texas schools to prioritize academics, he also sees value in an exposure to biblical principles that have shaped Western civilization.
I think being there in the schools is important. I think it would be good to have in the schools.
If it's good enough for the Supreme Court also to display in that courtroom, should be good enough for a public school classroom.
In Texas, Paul Petit, CBN News.
Thank you, Paul. Gordon, back to you.
Well, this debate will go on and on and on and until we get clear direction, but I doubt we'll ever get clear direction because it depends on who's on the Supreme Court. So you change members of the Supreme Court, you're going to change an interpretation of the Establishment Clause, which there is no established religion in the United States of America, and I firmly believe in that. I think enforced religion is no religion at all, and theocracies throughout history have not worked. Our founders came out of that kind of culture in Europe where there absolutely was a state church. And there's a reason they call it the Church of England. These were state funded. There was required taxes to be paid to it, required observance. All of these things they thought was against the very basic concepts of liberty. But on the other side, when you don't teach children anything, what you're doing is inducing chaos into our culture, where now everything is open to question, everything is debatable, and are there standards, and people can sneer at Christians and ridicule them fairly openly in our educational system. So when we look at this, let's keep in mind a study that was done by MIT that proved that when you hold people accountable to a standard, and you tell students who are taking a test, you either have them read the 10 Commandments, or you have them say, you know, I understand there's an honor code and I will live in accordance with the honor code. It was amazing because MIT had no honor code, but when in the classroom, when you tell them, well, MIT has an honor code, they believed it. And what happened is they became better people. And that's the whole point. Are we trying to have our children, the generation coming up, do we want them to be better people? Well, if we do, we need to tell them standards to live by. The 10 Commandments is a really good starting place for that. Things like don't murder people, don't steal, don't bear false witness. All of these things need to be part of any culture of honor where we can actually trust each other. If we have no standards, well, then if anything goes, well, then absolutely anything will go. Let's have some standards, and in that, we'll have a better generation coming up.